So good evening, everyone, and welcome to our first meeting of standards in the new municipal year. I'd like to particularly welcome new members that have joined, and it's really a pleasure to have you here at the Standards Committee meetings. It's not one of those parts of the council that people often know about or we talk about, but actually it sits at the heart and integrity of everything that we do as a council. And actually, when those standards are in place, it means that we as elected representatives are able to do the jobs that the people elect us to do. So it might not be the most exciting part, but I believe it's one of the most important parts that we do. So I'm going to introduce myself. I'm Councillor Antoinette Bramble. I am the Statutory Deputy Mayor of the London Borough of Hackney and the Cabinet Member for Education, Children, Social Care and Young People, and the pleasure of being selected to represent the people in London Fields here in Hackney. Now, we don't normally do introductions, but I think as it's a new meeting, I really would like to do that. And as the chair, I have that privilege of making that call. Dawn, if you could introduce yourself.
Good evening to everyone. My name is Dawn Carter-MacDonald and I'm the Director of Legal, Democratic and also Electoral Services. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Good evening, I'm Peter Gray, Government Officer at Hackney Council.
Thank you. And if we start at the very back.
The last one, on the last one. Got it. Thank you. So I'm Nicola Hans and I am a co-opted member. Yeah, Nicola Hans, I'm co-opted member of the committee.
Can you hear me? Hi everyone. So I'm Councillor Joseph Ogun de Morin for Hackney Wick and a new councillor.
Councillor Shadietsi, Clissold Ward and Mayoral Advisor, Homelessness and Housing Needs.
Councillor Lynn Troughton, Kings Park Ward.
Ariel Ertan, the independent person to the committee.
Okay. Rob, are you able to introduce yourself?
Hello, yeah, I'm Rob Miller, Strategic Director of Customer and Workplace. I'm here for the members' use of IT item.
So just to let you know that, as I said, if it's one of our pots of members, and Louise does so much of the brilliant work working with Dawn's team, and often the person that I say, can we do this? And if so, what does that look like? And if you're telling me I can't, please explain why we can't. And is one of those people that are very knowledgeable within Dawn's teams and helps us do all the things in the way that we need to do and give lots of guidance. So thank you. All right, so we will now proceed to the meeting. As you can see, it's a real pleasure to welcome new members and existing members to this meeting. Apologies for absences. Well, Aoife, I had your apologies, but you are here. You are online. Councillor Ette?
Councillor Frank Buffer sent his apologies.
Thank you so much. Any other apologies? No? Okay, thank you. Do members have any declarations of interest for the meeting? No declarations of interest have been declared. And we are going to item 3 on the agenda, which is the unrestricted meeting minutes of the committee meeting that was held back in the 16th of February 2002. And I appreciate that that won't apply to new co-opted members, but those members that were existing members then and were present, can you agree the minutes? Agree, thank you. So we are now going to move on to item 4 of the agenda. And it's the terms of reference, and it's the programme of work in terms of references. Now, for existing members, there have been no changes to the terms of reference as of yet. So it's for new members that would have now looked at that, if there's anything that you would like to raise or discuss, and equally the programme of work, if there's anything that you would like to raise or discuss. Okay, well, thank you, colleagues. So we're now going to move on to item 5 of the agenda, and we're going to have the annual report from ICT. Before I bring in Rob Miller, and Rob, try not to go too red on the screen. Just wanting to thank you and the team for all the work that you have done through the pandemic to ensure that actually we could still meet. Very proud to say that Hackney, I think, if not was not the first, was one of the first local authorities that started to have their cabinet meetings online, because for us it was really important that at the time when the country was facing one of its most challenging moments, that you still had access to us, and actually it gave you a greater insight of the things that we do in the town hall and interface and see what we're doing in a way that we didn't do before. And we have no plans, and Rob isn't shaking his head at me differently to say that we have no plans to move back from having hybrid meetings and streaming. I think it's definitely the way forward, and I'm really happy that in Hackney we do that. Rob, over to you to introduce the report. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Chair. I shan't read through all of the report. Members who have joined previous updates will recognise a lot of the report, because this is something we bring every year. So this is the 11th year that this has been brought here. I'm pleased to report there haven't been any incidents in terms of breaches of members' use of IT recorded during the last calendar year. And that's updated there, and you can see that sustains a number of years of clear position there. The report highlights and reminds of some of the different roles that members have in terms of the Data Protection Act and their use of data. It's particularly complicated for members, as officers of the council, myself and my colleagues have a responsibility where the council is a data controller. That applies also to members in their official work, but then also you have individual responsibilities as a data controller where you're carrying out your ward member business, and also within your political context. So we're working with colleagues in member services, and we will refresh for all members, not just new members, the data protection training, and support. What we've done previously is, as well as the online training, provide in-person training to support with that. In section 5, we talked about the equipment offer. That remains the same offer of equipment. Members are able to communicate and organise themselves using the Google Workspace tools, and I'm pleased to report that since the dreadful criminal cyber attack, we have recovered the committee paper system. That's a combination of hard work in the IT teams, our external experts, but also give a real thank you to Dawn and Louise and colleagues in the committee services teams for the work they have done to make sure that we can both sustain the democratic processes when those systems weren't available, and bring all those records back together in the system that we have restored. So a real team effort there, and importantly, all of those files are now available and online in the way we're familiar with before. Chair, you mentioned virtual meetings, and I think when we met last time, we were just after the point where the regulations around only virtual meetings had expired, so we'd moved to hybrid meetings. We have made further improvements since then to the setup. There's more we'd like to do. We've completed a survey of the town hall, which has helpfully helped us assess the costs and what equipment and cabling we would be able to reuse, rather than simply buying in very expensive equipment. We need to do further work on assessing costs and funding for options to further enhance the hybrid meeting equipment. But I'm delighted to see how many. We had a further 158 meetings held over the last year. And I think hopefully members will agree that now that we're in a very different place to where we were before the pandemic. We all wish that tragedy had never occurred, but looking for things that we would want to sustain, I think being able to broadcast these meetings as live streams has really opened up the council further in terms of our democracy, and that's something which I think is a positive we'd want to keep. In terms of the cyber attack, like I said, because we had already adopted a strategy of moving to modern cloud services, reduced the majority of our old Windows machines, for example, we no longer ran. Members' access to communication tools and the like was uninterrupted by the attack, and I'm pleased that we're able to advise that the modern Gov system is now back. And again, a big thank you to colleagues who've worked closely with the technical teams to make that happen. So I'll stop there, Chair, but very happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Chair. And sorry, thank you, Rob. I've just said that you're Chair. Just going to say, as Chair, I'd ask two questions first before I hand it over to colleagues. So it's two things. Good to hear that there have been no breaches in use fighters here. I've done that thing sometimes that people do. I said two things, but actually it's three. So good to hear that there were no breaches around ICT. You talked about doing some research around hybrid meetings. What's the time scale for that? Would be helpful to know. And the third thing, if you could just give a little bit more reassurance around the work that you're doing around the recovery of the cyber attack. I know that in terms of volumes of casework, that has been a lot less now for elected members, but that hasn't gone away. So, for example, people wanting to pay their council tax, for example, some people are still having issues. So it'd just be helpful for you just to add a little bit more about what you're doing and give more reassurance. And I appreciate that. Given what I do, I've heard a lot of that, but I think it would be helpful for you to reassure other members, especially those that are new, on the work that's been happening. So, well, I'm just acknowledging, good to hear there was a breach, timescale, and more reassurance around the cyber attack in terms of residents being able to do simple things like pay their council tax. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. In terms of the timescale on further improvements on the hybrid meetings, I'm afraid I don't have any at the moment. We've got the detailed survey work that's completed, and that gives us the information we need to do the planning work, but we haven't started that yet. So that will be in due course. But what we have done over the last, I think, 6 months is replace some of the equipment that, for example, was between yourself and other people in the council chamber with lower profile equipment, so it's less obtrusive. So unfortunately, I can't give you a timescale on that at the moment. In terms of the cyber attack, we're preparing a further detailed update for all councillors, and obviously you've seen updates in the media as well, and the council continues to try to communicate and share updates with our residents. The attack itself was really extensive in the impacts. As you say, a huge amount of work from officers across the whole council has taken place to move services forward. I'm pleased that in the spring this year, the backlog of work for new benefits claims and changes of circumstances that we hadn't been able to process since the attack happened was largely cleared. There's some further work taking place over the summer where there are some particularly complex cases which need further attention. The thing I'd like to highlight, though, is we're really conscious that if you're a resident who's affected by that, even if we have made progress with 95% of the work, or in other cases, large proportions of the recovery work, if it's your benefits that are affected, that still is really important to you. So services are working really hard to do that. We think the benefit service will be operating in a way that people would recognise as normal by the end of the calendar year. We've done most of the work to catch up with the backlog, but we are still operating at longer processing times than we normally would, so that impacts on residents. Our colleagues in the land searches team had successfully caught up with the backlog of land searches that had accumulated while we were recovering from the attack, and had also worked extensively with the mortgage lenders so that transactions could go forward with indemnities. Again, huge amounts of work there, but I know that there'll be some residents impacted by this criminal attack, and I wouldn't want the progress that I want to recognise indicate that we're any less conscious of the impact on people who were sort of waiting for those services. So across the board, significant progress, but a lot more to do. And in some areas, for example, in housing repairs, colleagues in housing are working enormously hard, but a lot of the backlog there is also impacted by the effects of COVID. So you know, the impacts on residents of Hackney have had a double whammy, really, of the pandemic and also the criminal cyber attack. But huge amounts of work. I'd like to give real commendation to colleagues across the council for their real focus on residents and determination not to let the attack prevent us delivering our services.
Thank you. Do colleagues have any questions or comments? Councillor Trout. Yes, you don't.
Thank you, Chair. I just wondered, in relation to personal liability for any fines for breaches of Data Protection Act, whether there was any indemnity covering members' liability, because I know the fines can be significant, and I'm not sure if they're the same, you know, for personal liability as they are for corporate liability, but it'd just be helpful to have a bit of background to that.
Thank you. I don't know the answer to that. I'll have to follow up with colleagues in member services and come back to you if that's okay. So this would be where you're acting as a data controller yourself. I don't think the council would indemnify you for that, but I will check in terms of any provisions around that.
I mean, if that's, yeah, follow-up question, if I may, Chair. So that, you know, if we're not indemnified, you know, within the council's insurance provision, then perhaps we should be, you know, taking out personal insurance against that, you know, and I think it'd be good to get some advice around that at the same time. Thanks.
Ete.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Rob, for the hard work, and also to the team. Regarding the online data awareness training, I just want to know, when is this coming up? Is there a date for that the training will be rendered to members, both returning and the refreshers?
So returning members will have done the data training previously. I think they've done it within the last 2 years. We were due to run in-person sessions just before the pandemic as a refresher, and then we ran online sessions. I don't have the exact dates to hand, Councillor Etty, but I will make sure that those are updated to members as well through the member services team. We're linking in, there's an extensive programme of training that members are doing across a really wide range of different topics. So we're trying to make sure that we're building it in as part of that work, because we're really conscious of the demands of members.
Nicola.
So I'm conscious this is kind of in the intersection between conduct and digital tools, but I was just wondering if anywhere within sort of training and refreshing, are we looking at members' conduct, particularly in the use of their digital tools, and especially where people are speaking to them online, whether that's more traditional online like email, or where people are tweeting at members, and how that is handled and how they manage their conduct in the digital space?
Thank you. I don't know whether Louise or Dawn would be able to respond to that.
Louise, would you like to come on? Let's see if your microphone will work now.
Hopefully that's now working. Excellent. So I'm getting some thumbs up, so that's fine. In terms of how members communicate with others, whether that's through email or social media, it does form part and parcel of the code of conduct training that we have rolled out to all members of the council following the coming into force of the new code of conduct that came into force following the elections. And as members will know from when that was discussed and agreed by council, it established mandatory training, one of which is on the code of conduct itself. And as part of that, we have a discussion around how the code of conduct interacts with social media in terms of treating people with respect. For those, most of these members have now completed the training. In fact, I think all of the members of the Standards Committee have now undertaken their training. Members will also recall that we had several scenarios where we discussed some interplay between the two, and how members can find themselves falling foul of the code of conduct, potentially through use of social media. So it is part and parcel of the code of conduct training that members have been receiving.
Welcome, Councillor Lynch, and happy for you to answer a question.
I'm so sorry. Apologies. I got caught by somebody as I came in. It was just actually it's just a comment really, just to say actually the training that Louise and Dawn gave was absolutely excellent. I have to say it was an incredibly insightful, I think, for existing members and also for new members. And I think it absolutely reflected some of the challenges, particularly around planning and also around as you said, there was an excellent scenario about the use of Twitter and what you put on there and what you can do. So I absolutely, I think I fed back at the time, I think, to yourselves actually, but I just wanted to put that out in the public domain, that it was very good. And I don't know, it's maybe something that maybe other boroughs might want to learn from, because I thought it was incredibly good. So thank you for that.
Thank you, Councillor Lynch. I would definitely echo that actually the training was by Dawn and Louise was very, very insightful, very engaging and interactive, and it's taken something that can be quite laborious and challenging to be actually really insightful and helpful. And I think new members and existing and experienced members alike found that useful, and that's always a good test point actually, that everybody, no matter where they are on their political experience, feels impacted. So that's it. So can't see any more questions or comments. What I would say, Rob, is that, and I used to work in a school, not an advertisement agency. You know, you can't underestimate the importance of communication, because the longer that we move away from when the cyber attack happened, I think the less the community feel like it should be impacting the council. So I think it's really important to reiterate why this thing that's happened such quite some significant time ago still continues to be a challenge. I think that we just need to, you can't reiterate that enough. And if we make that clear, then it doesn't get conflating with existing challenges that we're trying to improve as a council. So thank you and your team for all the work that you're doing. And I will close this item as I see no further indications. Thank you. And I will now hand over. Thank you. You're welcome. And I'll now hand over to Dawn to introduce the standards report. Before I do, I just want to thank you, Elisa, again, as on the back of what Councillor Lynch so eloquently spoke about, is that training, support and systems in place so people have a really clear understanding of the Lowland principles and actually your place in being an elected member and the responsibilities around that, and equipping us actually to be good role models and good citizens in terms of taking that elected member role really seriously. So on that note, after the thank you, handing over to your team, and although it's not relevant to standards as such, I want to thank you for the award that you and your team won on terms of being a very diverse team. And actually it's an award where lots of law firms were there, actually, and I think we as Hackney were the only council that was there. So if you give your report, then speak a bit more about that, Dawn, although it's not relevant to the report. I think it's important to showcase the strength of your team. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair.
Leadership.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you very much. And thank you very much to Councillor Lynch as well for that recognition. Thank you. So good evening to everyone. The report is as set out, but I think it's really important that as members and also everyone watching online to read about the great work that the Standards Committee completed during 2021 to 2022. As the report says in its conclusion, the committee's aim is to continue to develop and maintain the council's ethical governance framework, and it's for the benefit of the authority, but also for the benefit of our elected members and also ultimately the residents of Hackney. And I think without wanting to be political at all, what we've seen happening in politics recently is really a very firm reminder for us that standards, good behaviour in public office, it goes key to what members do on a daily basis. And so the report sets out the great work that the committee undertook in that year. And I think what's really important is the work that we did around the members' code of conduct and ensuring that we were able to adopt the framework that had been set out by the local government association, but also including into our members' code of conduct the work that we do in Hackney and how we want Hackney members to behave in public life. And I think that was really important. The Task and Finish group did some really great work to ensure that the final document that was adopted by full council in January 2020 Two was produced a great code of conduct, a new code of conduct, and it was upon that we then decided to take the training to all of our new members following the elections in May. And so thank you to everyone who attended. We will also be running new further training throughout the year to ensure that everyone has equal access to that training around the code of conduct. We also looked at the registers, the Register of Declaration of Interest form, because it's also about transparency, making sure that as members, it's easily accessible for members to be able to highlight and to show where they have received gifts, any gifts in hospitality. So we're hoping that that will be a great success. And then finally, I think I would really want to give thanks to Ferrell for her work following her appointment as the independent person. You know, for myself as the monitoring officer, I need to be able to have somebody that I can liaise with. The law requires me to do so, but it's great to be able to have someone who's accessible, who really does take the time to look at what you've asked them to look at and to review, and then gets back to you with really great detailed thoughts on what she thinks about the complaints that have been received. And so that's been really great, and she's been a great asset in this role, and I'm continuing to looking forward to working with her as we go forward throughout the next year. Just quickly to say that we have had in 2021 to 2022, 14 complaints around alleged breaches of the code of conduct, and we set out in the report what those complaints were concerned with. And of the 14 complaints received, they were all submitted by members of the public, with one complaint being withdrawn. One complaint was not considered due to lack of information being provided by the complainant, and of the remaining 12, none of those complaints met the threshold for investigation. And as I've said, it's really important that as the monitoring officer, I can not just make those decisions by myself, but it's working in close collaboration with the independent person who has been excellent and a great source of challenge as well to myself. So thank you so much to everyone, and I hope if there are any questions, I'm happy to answer them. Thank you.
Thank you, Dawn. Any comments or questions? Nicola.
Within the remit of what is possible to say or share, as we've had in previous years' reports, did you find that there were any particular themes or pinch points that were prompting people to make a complaint, albeit they weren't complaints that merited further investigation?
Yes, so thank you for that. It's a really good question. The majority of complaints that were received were, I would say the trend would be around post on social media. So very much a focus point for us during the training, the most recent Members Code of Conduct training that we did, was just about bringing back to members' attention that where posts are being made, either be in a personal and private basis or in their capacity as a member, it's important to think, how is this going to be viewed? How is it going to be taken? And those were the majority of the complaints that we received. But as I said, none of them met the threshold to proceed to the next stage. But thank you.
Good question. Any other comments or queries? No, just want to thank officers for their continued work, and Councillor Lynch especially, and members now, some that have left, for always volunteering for the working group and doing the work that it takes to get reports of this place has been very useful as well. Just to say that although I suppose it's helpful for me to say that I am a deputy chair on the Local Government Association board, which is cross-party, and while my role there had no direct influence or part of the principles and the guidance that we formed our remit on, I just think in terms of transparency, it's helpful to notice, because people think, oh, sometimes you mention the LGA, sometimes you don't. So while Dawn would tell me it's not necessarily a declaration of interest, as I often mention it, I just thought it's helpful for me to mention that. So, and I also cannot take the credit on this occasion for giving that guidance that is now seen in other boroughs. But I just think that thank you again for all the work that you are doing, Dawn. Okay, so now so just for members to really approve and acknowledge the report, that will now be going to full council. Agreed? Okay, great. So the last agenda item is any other business, and I have not been notified of any further business. So just want to thank everyone for joining the first meeting of standards in the municipal year. I'm going to thank you in advance for the work that you will do, and especially for those of you that are going to be volunteering for any working groups that Dawn, Louise and I will say, can you please co-opt yourself onto. But yeah, thank you everyone. Take care and enjoy the rest of your evening.